A man who sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap to a businessman who paid him in cash and then thanked him for the opportunity. A thief who walked out of the most famous museum on Earth with the most famous painting on Earth tucked under his coat, past the guards, through the front door, into the street. A robber so beloved that when the police finally caught up with him, the public threw him a welcome home party. Ah, the bold criminal, history's most entertaining problem. Because here's the thing about crime. Most of it is sad, desperate, and forgettable. But every once in a while, someone commits one with so much sheer audacity, so much style, so much nerve, that the world forgets to be angry and just sits there slack-jawed going, okay, but how? These are those people. Here are 5 criminals whose boldness was so absurd it didn't get them forgotten. It made them legends. Ranked from, that's pretty gutsy, to no way that actually worked. Number 5, Vincenzo Peruggia. It's August 1911, and the Mona Lisa is hanging in the Louvre in Paris, which is already the most famous museum in the world, and the painting is, well, it's a painting. People like it. It's not yet the global icon it's about to become, and ironically, the man at number 5 is the reason it becomes that icon in the first place. See, Vincenzo Peruggia was an Italian handyman who actually worked inside the Louvre, which meant he knew 2 very useful things: where the Mona Lisa was, and that on Mondays, the museum was closed to the public for cleaning. So on Monday, August 21st, Peruggia simply showed up to work like he had every right to be there. Because as far as anyone could tell, he did. Walked up to the most valuable painting in France, lifted it off the wall, carried it into a nearby stairwell, popped it out of its frame, tucked the bare wooden panel under his white worker's smock, and walked out. That's it. That's the whole heist. No alarms because there weren't really any. No guards stopping him because why would a workman carrying something be suspicious in a museum full of workmen carrying things? He strolled out a side door and went home for lunch. And now here's the part that's genuinely hard to believe. Nobody noticed for over 24 hours. The blank spot on the wall was assumed to be the painting getting photographed or cleaned. It wasn't until the next day that someone went, "Hey, where's the Mona Lisa?" And the answer came back, "We were hoping you knew." When France finally realized the most famous painting in the country had simply walked out the front door, the nation lost its mind. The borders were checked. The Louvre closed for a week. The poet Guillaume Apollinaire got arrested over it, and he in turn pointed fingers at a young up-and-coming painter named Pablo Picasso, who got hauled in for questioning. Yes, that Picasso. Meanwhile, the actual painting was sitting in a trunk in Peruggia's tiny Paris apartment, about 2 miles away, where it stayed for 2 whole years, while he basically forgot to have a plan for what to do next. When he finally tried to sell it to an art dealer in Florence, claiming he was returning it to its Italian homeland out of patriotism, the dealer immediately called the cops. Peruggia got a slap on the wrist in about 7 months, and in parts of Italy he was hailed as a hero. And the painting, all that newspaper coverage, all that scandal, all those headlines about the daring theft, turned a nice Renaissance portrait into the Mona Lisa, the most recognized image on the planet. Peruggia didn't just steal the painting, he accidentally made it priceless. Number 4, Victor Lustig. And we're stepping up from stealing a thing to selling a thing that wasn't his, specifically the Eiffel Tower. It's 1925 in Paris, and Lustig, a smooth-talking con artist who spoke 5 languages and had run scams across 2 continents, is reading the newspaper when he spots an article complaining that the Eiffel Tower is rusting, expensive to maintain, and that the city doesn't really know what to do with it. Most people read that and think, shame. Lustig reads that and thinks, I could sell that. Now, you have to understand the absolute brass required here. The Eiffel Tower is not a small object. It is arguably the most recognizable structure in the world. And Lustig's plan was to simply sell it for scrap metal. To do this, he had a forger make him official-looking government stationery, declared himself this Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, and invited 5 of the biggest scrap metal dealers in Paris to a secret confidential meeting at a fancy hotel. He told them the government had decided the tower was too costly to keep and was going to be quietly demolished and sold off, but that the public couldn't know yet, so everything had to stay hush-hush. Then he took them on a limousine tour of the tower itself, sold the secrecy hard, and asked for sealed bids. Here's where Lustig shows he's an artist, not just a crook. He'd already picked his mark, a dealer named André Poisson who felt insecure about not being part of Paris's elite business circles. So Lustig pulled Poisson aside and confided that, well, as a government official, his salary was modest, and these big projects sometimes required a little personal encouragement to make sure the right man won the bid. In other words, he scammed the man and then asked the man for a bribe on top of the scam, and it worked. Poisson, now convinced he was dealing with a real corrupt bureaucrat, because honestly, what's more believable than a corrupt official? paid for the tower, and slipped Lustig a fat bribe to seal the deal. Lustig took the money, hopped on a train to Vienna, and waited for the newspapers to explode. They never did, because Poisson was so humiliated at having bought the Eiffel Tower that he never went to the police. So Lustig did the only logical thing. He came back to Paris a few months later and sold the Eiffel Tower again to a whole new group of scrap dealers. This time his mark did go to the police, and Lustig had to flee, eventually to America, where he later pulled off the almost unbelievable feat of conning Al Capone himself out of money and living to tell about it. The man sold a national monument. Twice, and got away with it both times. Number 3, and this one's special because this is the criminal who got away so cleanly that to this day, over 50 years later, nobody knows who he was. We call him D.B. Cooper. It's the day before Thanksgiving, November 24th, 1971, and a man in a neat business suit, a white shirt, and a black tie buys a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper and boards a Boeing 727 in Portland, Oregon. He orders a bourbon and soda. He's calm, polite, forgettable. And then, somewhere over Washington State, he hands a flight attendant a note. She assumes it's a lonely businessman slipping her his number and drops it in her purse unread, at which point Cooper leans in and quietly says, "You might want to read that. I have a bomb." The note says he's hijacking the plane. He opens his briefcase just enough to show her a tangle of red wires and cylinders, and then he calmly lists his demands. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by when they land in Seattle. No yelling, no panic. He even ordered a second drink and paid his tab. The authorities, weighing the lives of everyone on board, agreed. The plane landed in Seattle, the passengers were released in exchange for the money and the parachutes, and Cooper kept a few crew members on board and ordered the plane back into the air, heading for Mexico, low and slow. And then, somewhere over the freezing forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the dark, in the rain, Cooper lowered the rear staircase of the jet, strapped $200,000 to his body, and jumped out of the back of a moving airplane into the night. And he was never seen again. Not his body, not the parachute, not him. The FBI ran the largest manhunt in its history, chased thousands of suspects, and came up with absolutely nothing. The only physical trace ever found was a small bundle of the ransom cash, partially decomposed, discovered by a kid on a riverbank 9 years later. That's it. Whether Cooper survived the jump or died in the wilderness, nobody knows. And that's exactly why he became a legend. He didn't get caught, he didn't get bragged about, he didn't write a book. He just stepped backward off a plane into American folklore and pulled the door shut behind him. He's the only unsolved air piracy case in U.S. history, and the FBI officially gave up in 2016. The boldest part wasn't the bomb or the money, it was the exit. Number 2, the Antwerp Diamond Heist. And now we're moving from one bold individual to a crew so audacious they robbed what was supposed to be the single most secure room on the planet. It's February 2003 in Antwerp, Belgium, the beating heart of the global diamond trade, where something like 80% of the world's rough diamonds pass through. And deep beneath the Antwerp Diamond Center sits a vault 2 floors underground, protected by a security system that was, on paper, a fortress. A lock with 100 million possible combinations, infrared heat sensors, a seismic sensor, a magnetic field on the vault door, a security camera, and a private police force. 10 layers of protection, any one of which should stop you cold. Diamond dealers stored their goods there precisely because everyone agreed it could not be robbed.
The man who decided to rob it was an Italian named Leonardo Notarbartolo, and his crew's plan wasn't a Hollywood smash and grab. It was patient, surgical, and frankly insulting in how thorough it was. Notarbartolo had rented an office in the building itself 3 years earlier, posing as a diamond dealer, which gave him a legitimate tenant's access and endless time to study the building, the guards' routines, and the vault. His crew defeated the sensors one by one with stuff that sounds almost too simple. Hairspray to fool the heat and motion sensors, carefully placed tape and polystyrene, a homemade device to handle the magnetic field, and patience to slip past the rest during the quiet of a weekend when the building was nearly empty. They cracked into the vault, opened the safe deposit boxes one after another, and walked off with diamonds, gold, and jewelry worth an estimated over $100 million, one of the largest heists in history. The vault that couldn't be robbed had been robbed, and it had been done so cleanly that for a moment it looked like the perfect crime. And here's the kicker, the thing that makes it a legend instead of just a robbery. The diamonds were never recovered. To this day, Notarbartolo himself only got caught because of a sandwich. A partial DNA trace and some garbage, including food wrappers, dumped carelessly in a forest by an accomplice, led police right to the crew. He served his time, gave a famously slippery interview where he both confirmed and muddied every detail, and the $100 million in diamonds simply vanished into the world. The vault is still down there. The diamonds never came back. Number 1, the Great Train Robbery of 1963. The crime so bold, so theatrical, and so weirdly charming to the public that its perpetrators became household names, folk heroes, and tabloid celebrities for the rest of their lives. Here's the setup. It's the dead of night, August 8th, 1963, and a Royal Mail train is rumbling through the English countryside from Glasgow to London, carrying mailbags, and crucially, a fortune in used banknotes being sent to be destroyed. A gang of 15 men, led by a small-time crook named Bruce Reynolds, had learned about this rolling treasure chest, and they came up with a plan that was almost stupid in its simplicity. Stop the train and take the money. But stopping a train is the hard part, so they did something brilliant. They tampered with the railway signals, covering the green go light and rigging the red stop light using a glove and a cheap battery, so that when the train rounded the bend, the driver saw a red signal and stopped exactly where the gang was waiting. No high-tech anything. A glove and a battery stopped a mail train carrying millions. The gang swarmed aboard, uncoupled the front cars carrying the money from the rest of the train, and, in the one genuinely ugly moment of an otherwise bloodless heist, struck the train driver, Jack Mills, over the head, an injury that haunted the public's image of the crime and the man for years. They forced the train forward to a waiting convoy, formed a human chain, and unloaded 120 mail bags in under half an hour. The take, £2.6 million, which in today's money is somewhere north of $50 million. They retreated to a farmhouse hideout to lie low and divide the spoils, even passing the time playing Monopoly, with real stolen money, a detail so perfect it sounds made up, and a detail that helped sink them, because they left fingerprints all over the board and the farmhouse. Most of the gang was eventually caught and handed brutally long sentences, up to 30 years. But here's why this is number 1. The British public, instead of being horrified, was delighted. The sheer cheek of it, the David versus Goliath image of ordinary men outwitting the system with a glove and a battery, made the robbers into celebrities. And then one of them, Ronnie Biggs, turned the whole thing into legend. Biggs escaped from a maximum security prison after serving only 15 months, climbed over the wall with a rope ladder, fled the country, got plastic surgery, and lived openly as a fugitive in Brazil for decades, throwing parties, giving interviews, even recording music, while Britain could not legally bring him home. He taunted the authorities for 36 years, became a folk celebrity, and only returned to the UK in 2001, voluntarily, old and ailing, practically as a tourist attraction. They stopped a train with a glove and a battery, played Monopoly with the loot, and turned a robbery into a national legend that's been made into films, songs, and books ever since. That's not just crime. That's showmanship. And that's why the Great Train Robbery is number 1. So there you have it. 5 criminals who were so bold, so brazen, so absurdly confident that history forgot to file them under villain and quietly slid them into legend instead. From a handyman who walked out with the Mona Lisa under his coat to a con man who sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap, the lesson here is dangerous and a little uncomfortable. Sometimes the difference between a crook and a legend isn't whether you got away with it. It's how much style you had while you did it. Don't try any of this at home, obviously, but you have to admit there's something about that kind of nerve. If you enjoyed this one, you know what to do. We'll see you in the next one.